Good morning, everybody. I'd like to call the Ottawa County Planning and Policy Committee meeting to order for Tuesday, December 5th, 2023. Got a lot of agenda items to talk through, not just in this committee meeting today, but other meetings following. Just in the spirit of unity and coordination and working together through this, we get into the time of public comment. Please address the chair. And I guess my ask today would be that as we go through things, let's have courtesy for each other and not talk over one another, so we can all hear everybody what they have to say. So I guess without further ado, if there's anyone that would like to step forward for public comment, please come to the podium.
Good morning. Is this
Morning.
aimed right? Okay.
Yep. Please state your name and where you're from.
I'm Pat Smith, Grand Haven Township, Professor of Economics Emerita. And I have two topics today. Two issues on the agenda I wish to address: the proposal to pay CPL costs for county employees, and then the HR issues. So grading the proposal for the CPLs, I would give this a C- in my class for unfounded claims and for failure to apply basic economic principles. The proposal states that there's scientific evidence that more CPLs result in lower crime, and I do not find this to be the case. There's no evidence presented in the proposal, not even a citation, which I would expect of my students. My reading of peer-reviewed scientific evidence is there are a few studies that don't show any association between CPLs and crime, but review articles tend to find more lax CPL is associated with more killings, intentional and unintentional. The rationale also mentions importance of self-defense, and the scientific literature suggests that guns in the home are sometimes, but rarely used for self-defense and more likely used in shootings, intentional and accidental. So I don't see that there's much benefit to providing these CPLs to county employees. There is a cost, and this is where the problem with the economic principles is involved. This is an indefinite proposal, so you need to account for inflation. CPL costs are probably going to rise in the future. But the main problem is the estimate is based on assuming that county employees will take up CPLs at the same rate as the county in general, at 8%. Okay. Everybody else in the county is going to be paying the full price of the CPL. And you're proposing to lower the cost to zero for county employees. So law of demand, you lower the price, quantity demand is going to go up. So I would predict that more than 8% of county employees would take this up. And so that the commissioner should take that into account. So from the review I was able to do from seeing the proposal, it seems like this is cost, but no benefit to the county. So it wouldn't be an efficient use of our resources. On the HR, I'm concerned about giving too much power to one person about hiring, firing, and discipline. Checks and balances are the nature of our government. It leads to better decisions. And to quote a great American, Abigail Adams, remember, all men would become tyrants if they could. So we want to keep our management decisions to be efficient. We want to hire the best people possible. And I think we need more oversight than what this proposal would allow. We want efficient government, whether we're Republicans or Democrats. So please keep that in mind. Efficiency. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Rebecca Patrick from Allendale, and my comments are relative to your policy proposals. First, the revision to the employee selection and employee discipline policies. With both of these policies, you wish to make HR involvement optional in employee selection and discipline. And I feel like I'm stating the obvious here, but we have HR specialists and HR processes for a reason. And that reason is there are laws that protect employees from discriminatory and harmful practices of employers. And those laws are complex and they have hefty penalties associated with them, such as the ones that can be imposed for violations of the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act, and others. Even very skilled executives cannot and will not be in a position to understand the requirements of these laws the way an HR specialist would. Sidelining HR is a risky legal error. My second comment is like the first, only regarding the security reimbursement policy. The stated reason for this proposal is that, quote, the scientific evidence shows that increases in CPL adoption results in less violent crime. I have no objection to anyone owning a pistol or applying for or receiving a CPL. What I do object to is the assertion that using taxpayer funds to pay people to carry a concealed weapon in the office is somehow going to make everyone safer. In fact, the evidence I've seen on this subject says the opposite, that it is just as likely to result in more violence or, in the best case, result in a neutral outcome. Commissioners, you might as well just come clean with the public because these attempts to camouflage your motives aren't working very well. Why not just say you want to fire people you don't like and fill county government with the ones you do like, whether or not they are qualified to do the job? And why not just say you want more guns in Ottawa County offices and that you want them there at taxpayer expense? If you care about the good of the county, I'd ask you to avoid turning this into yet another bad decision Tuesday and vote no on these three. Thank you.
Thank you.
Not
Morning.
as tall as Becky, so I'm going to move this down a little bit. Good morning. I'm Cindy Spielmaker and I live in Grand Haven, the city of Grand Haven. Govern with the least force, honor all people equally. These are your words, Ottawa Impact Commissioners, and yet we have been seeing just the opposite. The policies you are considering and will most likely pass will consolidate your power and allow you to govern with absolute force. Your governance has been one of instilling fear in all county employees. Who will be next to have the wrath of Joe Moss directed their way? With the passing of the employee hiring, firing policy, this becomes even more of a real threat. How have you honored all people equally? You've not demonstrated the same equal treatment to those of us who oppose your method of governance. You will respond to people who are aligned with Ottawa Impact and not respond to those of us who disagree with you, but would appreciate having some dialogue with you. You interrogate county employees as if they are the enemy. How are you honoring people equally? Joe Moss, you continue to work to take absolute control of our county government. To what end? The only conclusion I can come to is that your goal is to do as much damage as possible before you're voted out. Ottawa Impact Commissioners, I hope you're concerned enough about more lawsuits being filed if you eliminate the HR department from the hiring and firing process. I hope you vote against the policy changes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Melanie Skolton in Park Township. And I am here to register my opposition to the changes outlined in the HR policy in the packet today. I don't think it's wise to consolidate that much power under what is essentially a political appointee. It's not good governance. It's not good business. And it does open the county to additional lawsuits, as mentioned earlier. So I'm asking you please to vote against it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Karen over at Spring Lake. Who needs a county administration-based HR department that is responsible for managing all hiring, discipline, and firing according to standard good business practice guidelines? I contend the answer to that rhetorical question is that all county residents do, beginning with current and future employees, right down to every single resident who needs to be able to trust that the county administrative staff charged with the responsibility of delivering public services their tax dollars support are well qualified for their work. Ottawa County taxpayers also deserve to know their tax dollars are supporting services, not the coffers of the Ottawa Impact handpicked law firm Coleman Legal Group, who benefits handsomely each time the county is sued. And lawsuits will be filed against the county if appropriate hiring practices are jettisoned in favor of political appointments that serve only the ideological and political agenda of Ottawa Impact. I believe that if the board adopts these proposed policy changes, the only winners will be the political appointees themselves and those whose political careers and goals they were appointed to advance. And I fear that Ottawa County may well find itself unable to attract capable talent for a long time to come if these policy changes are implemented. I urge you not to vote for these policy changes without first engaging in a thorough review of analogous policies utilized by other counties, and to think long and hard about the damaging implications of implementing these changes for both the short and long-term future of our county. In my view, none of the proposed policy changes on this agenda, including the one that would reimburse county employees for obtaining or renewing their concealed pistol license, for all the reasons you've heard so far this morning, represent good governance decisions that benefit Ottawa County employees or residents. And I urge a no vote on each one.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Sheila Detloff, Holland Township. I'm here to address the HR policy this time. I think I'll save my CPL comments until after the meeting because I don't think I have time for both right now. According to a comparison sheet in the packet for today's meeting, the new policy makes these changes. 1, county administration may now at any time at its discretion directly hire any applicant into any open position without further process or approvals. 2, county administration may now participate in the screening process and may choose to eliminate or hire any candidate at any stage in the process. 3, any person with hiring authority, including the county administrator, may now make the decision to hire. 4, final approval for hiring of persons is now required to be sought and obtained through county administration. 5, during a public health emergency, the county administrator must approve the overall management of the selection and hiring processes. And 6, the county administrator is now given discretion to begin discipline at any step for any employee, in addition to each supervisor or manager. Now let's look at what Joe Moss says about the role of the county administrator. In a video from spring of 2023, Joe Moss said, and I quote, "There are certain things you cannot agree to disagree on. A single, unelected, unaccountable individual, an administrator, making decisions for 300,000 people in our county. The county operated like a triangle. So at the top of the triangle, you had the county administrator and the corporate council. The county board then rubber stamped the decisions," unquote. So the circle seems to be complete. You have become that which you hate. But where the former board had a competent, knowledgeable, fair-minded administrator, you have John Gibbs, who has exhibited that he has zero knowledge of either best hiring practices or labor laws. Now you're giving him the power to hire, fire, and discipline employees. Like almost everything you've done, these actions would beg for another lawsuit. And if you're patient, I'm sure you'll get it. Please vote against these hiring practices.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Megan Ryan from Holland Township. I'm here to comment on the proposed policy changes this committee will be considering. While some may be reasonable, like those about hiring significant others who aren't spouses, others that give extra power to the administrator and board should bring up many questions. One question is what hiring and discipline policies other counties or even businesses of similar size have in place. If you hear that these changes are best practice, please ask for data and examples to back up this claim. Another good question is whether this board would have wanted the previous administrator to have this kind of power to sidestep HR and other managers in hiring decisions and disciplinary action. Do you want the administrator chosen by the next board to be free to discipline the employees you have brought on without needing to go through HR? Several members of this board have been upset about how Health Officer Hambley was hired, though she went through a complete hiring process before the board voted. I hope you will not seriously consider giving yourselves or the next board the power to hire anyone without any further process. Another question to ask is whether it is wise to specifically give Mr. Gibbs the new powers outlined in these policy changes. He is already facing a lawsuit for a hiring decision he made, and we've already heard testimony that HR tried to explain the problem with his choice before he followed through with it. He has shown he is not willing to listen to their advice for his own department, even when HR has an official role in hiring. I think that removing HR from the process and allowing Mr. Gibbs to act within any department will result in more legal liability for the county. Fiscal conservatives would be opposed to opening us up for more expenses that could easily be avoided. Thus, members of this board who have been opposed to what they see as power grabs by previous boards and who claim to be fiscally conservative should oppose the policy changes that will allow the current and future administrator and board to ignore HR expertise and recommendations in employment decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning.
Morning, Dan Zimmer, Port Sheldon Township Chairperson. Having an HR department in namesake only is unacceptable. It would not be in the public interest to make any of the proposed policy changes. The only interest that is served is that of Ottawa Impact. You are public servants, not self-serving soloists. Having no form of HR puts organizations at risk of violating a number of employment laws. These issues could damage both the organization and the well-being and productivity of its employees. Employees can reach out to HR with complaints about workplace harassment, bullying, and violence. HR staff can advise management on the best course of action and conduct investigations. It's clear having no HR could leave employees feeling unsupported. An organization's HR practices can foster a collective level of commitment in its workforce, including candidate selection, hiring, training, and development efforts. Stating, hire him because he is young and I can boss him around is no less derogatory or offensive than saying, hire her because she sure fills out a skirt. The direction and intent of this board and an administrator are to subvert hiring protocols to gain total control and domination by any means necessary. This board is not interested in talented subject matter experts. You only want dogmatic loyalists. The analogy of comparing this board to arsonist is applicable because I actually think you enjoy watching the flames as the county burns to the ground. You are delusional or sadistic. The more the outcry to the discord you initiate, you see that scream meter as an indicator you are on the right course. It is as if the more displeasure you promote, the greater satisfaction you gain from it.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Megan Zickus. I'm from Allendale Township. As a proud Loyola New Orleans Law School alum, welcome. And also as a proud gun owner and someone whose husband has spent the last 30 years of our marriage accumulating a royal arsenal with a 1,500-pound safe that broke the steps as it got moved into my basement. It's not coming back out. I would like to speak to the fact that about the CPL that you also pay for hunting licenses for all the carriers. This would allow you to humanely put down injured animals at the side of the road and cull the herd in local communities. And this meat could help offset the cuts made to the food programs. This would help return Ottawa County to what everyone claims to be is the important ideal of impacting families, perhaps feeding those children. Or perhaps on a different level, a hopeful level, you recognize the upset of a community erupting into even more angst than what we're already facing today.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment? Good morning.
Morning. Happy holidays, by the way. Bob Spayman, Blendon Township. I was going to save my comments until the end, but I'll join in the tirade of comments that have already been said. It appears that the two resolutions concerning the HR is kind of trying to take over or be in charge of the HR department. It's nothing more than that. You want to have an incompetent county administrator be in charge of the hiring process and the disciplinary process. And I tell you, the guy can't even remember what happened 2 months ago. And he's afraid of being in the lake somewhere if he doesn't obey Joe Moss's narcissistic handful. We have an HR department that is very good. Marcy is very good. I worked with her for about 4 years before I left. And she is very good. They are very good. They know what they're doing. Apparently, Mr. Gibbs got a Cracker Jack box and it had some HR stuff in it, and he figures he's an expert in it. He is not an expert. He's had no training in it. And it's not something that is good governance by any means to have him do it. He is incapable of doing it. He's afraid of Joe Moss very much. This has Joe Moss's fingerprints all over it. Very transparent, but it has Joe Moss's fingerprints all over it. He's a narcissist that wants to have control all over the place. And who knows what's next, what he's going to do. Have the hallways and the bathrooms and everything else under his control? Don't know. But he's got a mission. It's a sick mission. It's not very helpful to everybody else. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, PJ Muir, Robinson Township. You sit over here and you listen to this character bashing, personal attacks. The school of thought I came from, if there's a problem, you identify the problem, and then you offer or propose a solution. All you hear over here from this side is how bad everybody is. I don't hear a problem. I don't hear offered a solution, but yet they're self-proclaimed experts on everything, and they can do a better job at every position than everybody's been appointed at this point. So I challenge them, Mr. Chairman, let them step up and do the jobs. Let them run for these offices. Let them be elected in these positions and use their subject matter expertise to doing a better job than what you are. I commend each and every one of you. I don't agree with each and every one of you, but I commend you for the positions you're in, and I thank you for doing the job you're doing. God bless.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment? Okay, there will be another opportunity at the end of the agenda. So our next item, can I get a motion for the approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Support.
All right, so we have a motion and a support. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, we have a approved agenda. Next item is the consent resolutions from consisting of the meeting minutes from the November 7th Planning and Policy Committee meeting. Is there a motion to move? Okay, we've got a motion. Is there support?
Second.
All right. Motion and support. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. All right, that takes us to our first item of business. We'll be talking the first couple items with our Parks Department Planning and Architectural Expert, Kurt Terhar, and we have Jason Chamlin, our Parks Director, with us. So you guys are going to thumb wrestle for?
We are. We're going to tag team. So.
Okay, great.
Do you need a motion, Mr. Chair?
Yes. Yep. So this first item, we have a suggested motion to accept the grant agreement from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation for assistance to complete natural features assessment and design work for ecological enhancements at Ottawa Sands and Harbor Island in the cities of Ferrisburgh and Grand Haven, and authorize the establishment of a capital project in the amount of $275,000 and forward to the Board of Commissioners for approval. Do we have a motion?
Second.
All right. Take it away, Jason.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be in front of you today. As many of you might know, but as a reminder, we have been working along the Grand River and the coastal corridor for decades. And just within the past few years, we had worked with Audubon to evaluate the significance of that corridor. And what we found is what we had already known, but we've been able to document scientifically that the Grand River Coastal Corridor has some of the highest quality natural communities in the state and the Midwest. So they have high levels of biodiversity that then help support sensitive and rare birds, and particularly waterfowl. This is of particular importance because historically we have lost over 73% of the coastal wetlands that our communities used to have. So really looking at that whole region in particular, and how can we continue to work to plan how to protect some of those that we already have there. So this grant will help us do this. It will focus on natural features assessments, preliminary design enhancements, and really look at increasing flood and erosion protection of those areas, in particular with Ottawa Sands, and then Harbor Island also. It'll focus on improving the biodiversity and then restoring and creating some of those wetlands. So one of the exciting parts of this project, we were able to work with the city of Grand Haven, as well as ELGRO, which is the Lower Grand River Organization of Watersheds. And they both committed to provide funding that they already have allocated in their budgets as the match. So we have funding both from the city of Grand Haven and ELGRO that then will provide the match for this grant. So it is at no cost to the parks or the county. So, and yeah, happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Jason? Commissioner
Jason,
Bergman.
This includes the SAG area?
The SAG area, so all of the shoreline on Ottawa Sands that, and I think it identifies how many feet of shoreline. It's 50. And then as well as the shoreline and the wetlands at Harbor Island. So that will be incorporated into, they have a significant project from their decommissioning of their old power plant, but then there's also historically a local community dump there that they are working on trying to evaluate how to address that site and mitigate, you know, some of the historic impacts. But this will provide them then additional information for that.
So does it go as far south as the Linquist Dune area as well?
It will, at least for now, it will focus on the shorelines of our property, but we could definitely include potentially Grand Haven's property there, and that's Ferrisburgh, I think, owns it. So yes, it could include all that shoreline as well. Yes.
I am just curious, does this at all, and I didn't see any indication of it, but does this at all involve any land acquisition or future responsibility for Harbor Island?
Nope.
Okay.
No, and it will essentially do research and then preliminary design, and then community engagement, but it's all on the, you know, the initial front end to complement that then can be used for, you know, they're either restoration or cleanup of the site.
Commissioner Moss.
So between Harbor Island and Ottawa Sands was acquired by the county, is that right? Yep. But Harbor Island is then owned by Grand Haven, City of Grand Haven? Yes. Do we know like approximately how much of this entire project is going to be dedicated between the two? I don't.
And is it meant to do environmental cleanup on Harbor Island?
I don't think so at this point, it would be focused on natural features. So if we think about the river corridors and the shoreline and wetlands, it would be more focused on the enhancement and protection of those features versus the environmental mitigation and cleanup work. So they already, and that's part of, they have HDR under contract who is doing monitoring and research at the site. Those contract dollars are actually part of the match. So they're focusing on water quality, what's underneath, yeah, this is more of the natural features stuff that can help with the, kind of next phase of that conversation.
Do they know what the next phases look like? Are they planning for cleanup, or I haven't heard much about it?
So, and I certainly wouldn't want to represent that I have an understanding of the city's, but kind of project. But I think right now they're trying to evaluate what the conditions are as far as what needs to be mitigated and cleaned up on the site. They're going to be in the next, quarter. I believe that they'll start on a public engagement campaign to ask the community to provide some input on what the community would like to see with that site. A lot of this work could complement that and feed into that as well. So there's a public engagement component of this. So, yeah.
But
Mr.
this-
Bergman?
This is more about creating an environment for birding and birds and the ecology for the wildlife and that kind of thing, correct?
From our standpoint as a
That's what this
conservation,
grant is about.
yes, as a conservation-based agency, we want to, try to help the city understand what is there and could be there that could complement those natural features that we have right across the river at Harbor Island. And, then it will be up to the city and the community to determine how they go forward. We're just trying to provide them with the best information to do that. So, because it's, as I said, it's some of the most sensitive natural features that we have in the state in the Midwest. So.
Mr. Bonema?
Jason, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Have we engaged in years gone by other local stakeholders to help with these improvement projects that, could help with even shouldering some of the costs, providing some manpower? Even I know as a Boy Scout myself, we used to get pulled into projects like this from time to time, but are there local stakeholders that have shown interest in helping with this?
So I referenced the Audubon report, which I'll be happy to share with the administration and to the Board of Commissioners. So we conducted that in 2021. It included Audubon was contracted on our behalf, and then it interviewed stakeholders in the whole region, from Muskegon down to Port Sheldon, and then up the river towards Grand Rapids. And so there were numerous people who were identified as stakeholders and partners. The matching dollars that I referenced from Elgro, they now are working on a next phase of that, how to engage all of those stakeholders into looking at this as a region and managing it cooperatively, managing invasive species. And, so I think that, we're hand in hand with them in that, and we feel like this complements that work. So yeah, hopefully that answered kind of on a high level.
It does. I'd be interested to maybe follow up with you on that
Certainly.
after the meeting.
Certainly.
Just from an interest standpoint, I know birding is very popular in West Michigan. I've got a great uncle that teaches me things every time we come in contact with each other. But how many species of birds or breeds of birds do we have in West Michigan that we enjoy?
Well, if we want to, I certainly will not proclaim to be even a resident birder on our staff. We have several. What I can say is Ottawa Sands, interestingly enough, so when we've done some bird inventories there, for instance, all of our local woodpeckers. It provides habitat for all of those woodpecker species, and they've all been recorded there. So I wouldn't, Kurt, unless you want to, I don't think you have the two strongest birders
Right.
on our staff here with you today, but
No problem. Yeah. Thank you, though.
you're welcome. My pleasure.
Jason, I remember a lot of the work that Elgro was doing a few years ago, and maybe Commissioner Bergman might remember the efforts in the Phragmites removal, pretty significant in the Harbor Island area, and I wasn't sure if that may have been perhaps like this type of funding that was involved in that a few years back.
Well, so but that's a great example. So pretty aggressive and fast spreading invasive species that then threatens these sensitive ecosystems. You know, we work to try to manage those on our parks properties as much as possible. And then there are other public agencies and nonprofits who help try to manage those for private owners and other public agencies who might not have the staff. So the conservation district. So this, you know, some of the work that we did with Audubon and then Elgro's working on now is looking at it from a regional perspective, or the other term is landscape level, and how do you kind of cooperatively manage against invasive species or other, you know, threats to those natural areas. So that definitely is along the lines of what we're doing. So.
Okay. Okay, final opportunity for questions on this one. One more question?
One easy one. Just curious on the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, has the county historically done work with the foundation for grants? And
so we have had several grants, some directly with them, but then also we have another one that we are the subrecipient from Audubon, and that's doing some of the restoration work that's ongoing right now at Ottawa Sands. So.
Okay. I will look to our clerk for a roll call vote on this.
Mr. Moss,
yes.
Mrs. Curran,
Yes.
Mr. Bonema,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodey,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mrs. Medema,
Yes.
Mrs. Ebel,
Yes.
Mr. Bergman,
Yes.
Mr. Belknap,
Yes,
motion passes.
thank you. Okay. Thank you, Jason. So I guess for the next one, the Kirk Park renovations playground with a suggested motion of to approve and forward to the Board of Commissioners the contract with Great Lakes Recreation Company in the amount of $103,807 for the installation of a new playground at Kirk Park. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Good morning, Kurt.
Good morning. I've been here twice before about this project, if you recall, asking for approval of contracts for some mundane stuff like a new wastewater treatment system. And that actually is basically completed. Then the last time I was here, we approved a contract to do a complete renovation of the restroom building there, and that is in progress. And now we get to something a little more fun, is replacing the playground that is currently at Kirk Park. That one is about 30 years old and is not fully accessible. It's really at the end of its lifespan. So we got the bids for a new one. This will be completely accessible. It has a rubber safety surface. It's not a huge one like we've done at some of our parks, but it's meant to supplement some of the other activities that happen there, like particularly the picnic shelter and some of the other activities outside of the beach that go on at Kirk Park. So we'd love to get this going. We think we can get this done in time for summer if we get this contractor on board.
Okay. Any questions for Kurt? Okay. Seeing none, let's go to a roll call vote.
Mr. Bergman,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Bonema,
Yes.
Mrs. Medema,
Yes.
Mrs. Curran,
Yes.
Mrs. Ebel,
Yes.
Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodey,
Yes.
Mr. Belknap,
Yes,
motion passes.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on our agenda, the first of 5 policies for review. This first one is related to accounting, auditing, and financial reporting. with a suggested motion to approve and advance to a first reading before the full Board of Commissioners, the revised accounting, auditing, and financial reporting policy. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. I see that Karen is with us, and I know there's been some work on this with Administrator Gibbs as well, so I'll be looking to Karen, I guess, to start us off.
So this policy really outlines the accounting rules that we follow and the filings that we do of our financial reporting. Part of doing the financial reporting, accounting assumptions and estimates are required. So frequently, Government Accounting Standard Board, which establishes all the rules that we follow, kind of talks about those and sets out guidelines for us to follow. With all of the IT-based subscriptions that is now becoming the norm for technology, they're basically establishing the rules in which those have to be capitalized. So treated almost as a long-term capital purchase. This policy really just recognizes that. We wanted to update it and then establish the criteria in which we would capitalize it. Similarly, if you have our threshold for capital items is $5,000, but if you say buy many laptops within the county, is that then a capital purchase? So this really updates with new accounting rules. It updates our policy, which allows us to continue to prepare the financial statements.
Okay. Thank you for the overview. Is there any questions for Karen? Okay. Hearing none, since this is a policy, I believe we do roll call vote on this as well.
Up to you, sir.
Okay, I think I'd like to, if
Yeah,
that's okay.
absolutely.
All right.
Mr. Bonema,
Yes.
Mrs. Ebel,
Yes.
Mr. Bergman,
Yes.
Mrs. Medema,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodey,
Yes.
Mrs. Curran,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Mr. Belknap.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, our next policy for review is the county policies policy with a suggested motion of to approve and advance to a first reading before the full Board of Commissioners, the revised county policies for review and comment. Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
Okay. I will look to Administrator Gibbs to take us through this one.
Chair Belknap. This policy has just a couple of changes. One of the changes is that previously it required a 2/3 majority vote of the Board of Commissioners to suspend a board policy. We believe that this was out of line with statute and the board rules. So now the requirement is a majority vote, not a 2/3 vote, is the first change. The second change is that the Internal Policy Review Committee will review the policy at least once every 4 years, whereas previously it was at least once every 2 years. And that is at least, so of course, it's going to be reviewed more frequently than that. But it is saying that at least once every 4 years to review these. And this change is meant to reflect the new 4-year term that the county commissioners will have. And those are the two changes in this policy.
Okay. Commissioner Zylstra.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate that. So my understanding on this policy, as well as the remaining 3, is that none of them have been run through legal yet. Maybe I'm mistaken on that, but
You are mistaken. That is not correct.
so they've all been run through legal.
Yes, I sent these policies to legal on June 19th, 2023.
In the current form?
Yes, basically, there's only minor changes from what I sent at that time.
And on this policy, as well as the remaining 3 that are on our agenda.
The county policy was sent recently. The other 3 were sent on June 19th.
Okay. That is not my understanding.
If I may ask, where does your understanding come from?
Maybe council can talk about that. I don't want to disclose something that
Well, I wasn't prepared to talk about the policy.
No, I understand it's the policies plus the remaining three. And I just want to get some clarity because as Mr. Gibbs is saying, he believes that all four policies have been run through legal. That is not my understanding.
Recently, we received the policy. We have not had an opportunity to do a deep dive in terms of that particular policy.
Mm.
And I'll have more to say on the other policies.
Okay. I don't have it. I mean, most of, what I have to say is basically on the last two of the four policies. But the fact that none of the four, as you're saying, have had that deep dive, I would move to remove this policy and the remaining three and just let legal have that deep dive.
I would say that legal can still do that deep dive while they remain on the agenda, because there are two more readings of the policy coming and changes can be made.
I understand they can be made, but I think before we take that first step, let's have, council take a look at them, do their deep dive on these four policies, and then go forward.
I would say there's no reason to delay because both of those can be done at once.
Are you making a motion?
I
Doug?
did make a motion, yes.
Okay, I'll second that.
Okay, so we have a motion to, Commissioner Zalster, would you mind just repeating that? So
So to remove this, the policy and county policies, as well as the remaining three policies, the security reimbursement policy, the employee behavior discipline and rules of conduct policy, and the employee selection policy.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Yep.
To have them reviewed by the attorney.
Yes,
and-
policy.
And the employment attorney.
Okay, so
Thanks
if
for
I understand
clarification.
correctly, what we're trying to accomplish with this motion is to address the next three items.
This and the next three, apologies.
Okay. Yeah, I guess we can vote on that. I guess just my preference would be if we kind of take these one by one. If I'm just provide some commentary on my familiarity with working with policies through the years is a lot of times we'll have existing policies on a cycle, they get reviewed. And so it's sort of like which comes first, chicken or egg situation. And I'll take, I guess, responsibility for this as the chair of this, because I encourage that we move these policies for conversation so that, we can take in consideration members before we go to, our corporate counsel, because that will be a part of the procedure that would then, be taken for that first full reading to the Board of Commissioners. But if we need to take a vote on this motion, so let's.
Well, I did make the motion. It was seconded. Like I said, I think that having all four policies, thoroughly vetted by legal before we even consider them makes sense to me. Keeps us safe from, legal liability. And let's, council weigh in on a deep dive on the four, so.
I would just say, I don't think it hurts to have conversation. I agree with you, Roger, about that. So I would like to see the policies remain on the agenda for today. And I think this conversation maybe could have happened at the approval of the agenda. But I would like to have them remain on the agenda, have discussion today, and that does not at all preclude having corporate counsel then take our feedback and go back and do a review of the policies. But I would like to have that discussion remain on the agenda.
Commissioner Mottama?
Yeah, question for Mr. Gibbs. Have you run these policies by HR or any HR staff to get their weigh in of concerns, professional opinion on these changes at all yet?
Yes, I talk to HR on a near daily basis, so we discuss these kind of things all the time.
Would it surprise you to find out that that's not the case that I'm hearing?
No, it would not surprise me that for you to say that.
Okay. And what is your experience in creating policy? I was looking through some of your resume. Have you worked in HR creating?
I'm not going to get
policy
into my resume with you right now.
Well, I need
If
to
you have a question on the policy, I'll
asking
be
me
happy to
to
answer
give
it.
you authority, Mr. Gibbs. you're asking me to vote for that. I need to know that you have the competence to do that.
Of course I do.
No, that's not the question. I'm asking for
I'm not going to
evidence
sit
of
here and
that.
play games with you. If you have a question on the policies, I'll be happy to answer it.
My question is what is your experience? Your
You have my
related-
resume, as you said, so you already have the answer to that question.
So I don't see anything in there.
We'll keep looking because it's in there.
Commissioner Moss?
Guess I'd like to echo what Commissioner Rhodey said and say I'm totally comfortable with having more conversation on these today. I'm not sure why Commissioner Zalstra would not want to have conversation. So I disagree with his view of the process that we're going through. So I'm going to vote no on his motion.
Commissioner Miedema?
I'm also supportive of continuing discussion. I'll be voting no on the current motion. I do think it's very vital to have legal take a look at all of the policies before we would ever take a final vote. But I think we're in the process of discussion, and that's why there's a 3 reading for policies. So we can have discussion and then it can be taken to legal at that point.
I think if we're going to continue to have discussion amongst the board, that we should only be considering things that would pass legal, because we don't want to open ourselves up to additional liability. So we have attorneys at hand, ready to go, ready to do this work. We also have a competent HR staff that I think should be afforded the opportunity to give their professional opinion on these things, to move forward, to have discussions on policy that hasn't passed muster yet. With both of those steps, I think is putting the cart before the horse. I think that this certainly could be done, and then we consider options that would pass both HR and legal. I think that would be a higher and better use of our time than discussing options that we shouldn't be talking about right now.
Commissioner Curran?
I would agree with that. I think that it's important. I think that there have been instances in the past where we have had conversations where we didn't know which direction we could go. And I think that this could be one of those situations. So why wouldn't we just take it off the agenda and then find out what we can legally do before we move forward and make sure that we are doing it with the correct legal guidance.
Okay.
Versus having conversations that won't matter because it's not legal.
Commissioner
I
Bergman?
would concur with what Rebecca is saying. And I would also add that I believe Mr. Gibbs fails to recognize that he works for us, and that when we ask about your resume and your experience, we should expect an answer, not that we can find it on your resume. And I don't believe we can find it on your resume. You have the qualifications to do hiring and firing. So I would ask for that at some point in time. And I think before we move forward on this, I think we need to get information from Mr. Jordan about, whether this is legal.
Well,
What is the legal ramifications of what we're doing here today?
Another additional comment I would have is that we're considering one of the items here. The changes in this policy are quite minor. And it kind of sounds to me like from some of the comments here, I'm hearing a desire for a new policy from kind of the more liberal end of this bench, that they would prefer HR and legal approve everything we talk about before we talk about it. So I'm opposed to that. We are a board and we can bring things, or the administrator can bring things to committee. And if it goes through the proper process, which it has, we have had discussions, it's gone to the chair. Let's have discussion on it. I think that is completely normal.
I'd like to call on our committee member, Gretchen Cosby, who's joined us remotely. I don't know if she can hear or we can hear Gretchen.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Gretchen.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I had a question for Mr. Jordan. With the exception, Mr. Jordan, of action item number 4, have you had opportunity to review action items 5 through 7?
Well, thank you, Commissioner Cosby. We have had opportunity. In fact, we had our initial review of those policies way back in June and July. We had concerns at that time with some of the changes, proposed changes in those policies. And while I have some experience in the area of employment law, working with the city of Lansing, I will not profess to be an expert in that area. So we sought the help of outside counsel who does and works in that area on a daily basis. And after consulting with him, some of the same concerns were raised, and we voiced those concerns. And at the time, there was a lot of things going on in the summer, and these policies were put on the back burner, I will say. And they did not come back again until, I would say, very recently, on a Friday, I think between Thanksgiving and the next week. So we have not had an opportunity to review again these policies, and we would recommend and suggest that these get tabled. I'm not saying that you don't discuss it among yourselves, for us to then vet it far more than it has been at this point. I also should make sure that I say that we did put forth a memo last Saturday. I did voicing those concerns, some of the concerns that we have with these policies.
I need to chime in here. When I sent these policies to Corporation Counsel on June 19th, I did not receive any feedback in terms of the policies not being workable or anything in the policies that should be changed. So I have not seen or received that feedback. And then the message that was sent on Saturday that Councilor Jordan has just referred to was not a red line of the policies, and it did not go through and indicate what was possible and what should be changed in order to accomplish the goal of those policies. So I was not able to work with that in order to make any changes for the agenda today. So that's the state of where we are today.
Mr. Moss.
I'd love to go to a vote. I'm still going to vote no, because I'd like to talk through some of these. I don't think there's anything wrong with talking through it. And if people would like to hold their comments until some legal review, then perhaps, some of these could be sent to legal next. But like, for instance, we're still on the county policy, which I sort of think everybody is likely okay with. There's nothing legal about this one. So I guess I'd like to go to a vote.
Commissioner Zylstra?
Go ahead. Yeah. We've heard from council today that you've not had a chance to really do a deep dive yet, and that you would like to give some feedback, I think is the word that you used. Mr. Gibbs, would you be opposed to receiving feedback from council?
Yes, I would not be opposed. That'd be perfectly fine. Yeah, I'm okay with that.
So I think that would be a good move to make. I think we're all on board for that.
Well, I'm not on board for tabling. I think we can still receive the feedback while the items remain on the agenda. But I'm perfectly fine with receiving feedback from corporate counsel.
I think that would be a mistake. I'll just put myself on the record for that.
I just want to confirm, is Commissioner Cosby have any more questions? Her hand is still up. Okay.
Yes, I do, Roger. I think as I'm hearing Mr. Jordan explain that he has reviewed these policies, and since this is a three-step process, would it not be prudent for us to at least have discussion today? And then we can hear what concerns are, and then decide what next steps may be.
Why don't we go and take that vote, and then we'll see where we shake out. And just again, I wanted to comment before we take that vote. If there is some dysfunction in this, I take responsibility as the chair for this, due to the fact that I think we all come to working through policies differently and sort of an established order. There was a time that I was very involved in some statewide policies on transportation issues. And it ended up being one of these items where one policy took over a year to get approval. So maybe that's not the case in this situation. Each policy is kind of on their own merit. So that's really why I wanted to have conversations on each of these today. And if we need to move some of these forward to legal and labor attorney to look at before we, see this first reading at the commission, that's fine with me. But I'd like to take these one by one, but let's take the vote.
Can you just restate what the
Yes,
vote is?
let's restate the
Sure.
motion.
So the motion is to send all four policies, including the policy on county policies, security reimbursement policy, employee behavior disciplinary rules of conduct policy, and employee selection policy, and move them to corporate counsel for what I would hope would be a kind of a red line addition, so we can view that and have a more informed choice.
Took a little longer than I thought.
Okay, and we have a second for that. So Commissioner Ebel.
I understand the discussion that's going on today, and I have a couple questions. I'm not sure who to ask, but since the agenda was approved, can we still, according to Robert's rules, go ahead and remove these off the agenda and table them?
Yeah, I believe so, if that's the will of the body, yes.
And then I also heard corporate counsel saying that he recommends that these be tabled so that they can look at them a little bit more closely. Is that what I heard?
Yes, I did say that.
And in reviewing these, I guess I'm trying to figure out what are the advantages of doing it now and looking at these versus tabling them and having corporate counsel review those. I guess I'm trying to understand the pros and cons of, what it would benefit or not benefit. That's where I'm not sure I'm clear on that.
Commissioner Moss?
I guess I'd try to answer by saying we're on number 4. I would personally prefer to have the conversation on these items, which is why I'm going to vote no, because I'd like to have the conversation. We could send these other ones or some of these to legal, but then we would be dealing with those one at a time. So in my view, what Commissioner Zylstra is asking is just, remove 4 through 7 without discussion. I'd prefer discussion.
Can I just answer, because it's my motion, I just wanted to answer Commissioner Ebel's question. I think the simple answer is just so we have a more informed choice with legal's participation. I think that's basically the answer. I understand what Commissioner Moss is saying by have a discussion. If this had appeared as a discussion item, I think I would 100% agree with him. This is appearing as an action item. So I think being this close to action, I would definitely prefer that all 4 come up to have a more informed choice.
Commissioner Rhodey?
Yeah, I agree with Chair Moss that I think discussion on these items is important. I think our voices are important and can even give some direction to legal as far as maybe where some of our concerns are or where our thoughts are. And I think there is some value to having discussion on each of these policies today as we go forward, instead of going to legal and then having them come back and then having to have those discussions at that point. I think it just helps to speed up the process a little bit. Personally, I'm 100% for having the policies that need to go through legal, and to be reviewed again. But talking about them today and discussing them today does not prohibit us from having corporate counsel take another look at these policies. So I will be voting no.
Commissioner Curran.
Just to kind of, since I seconded the motion, I mean, as I've said, Lucy, there have been instances where we've looked at things without knowing all the facts first. And it has put us in situations that are not the best. And I think that it's very important that we find out what the facts are before we make decisions. This isn't a discussion item, it's an action item. And I think that based on corporate counsel's advice, I want to support what corporate counsel is advising and have these looked at prior to making decisions that could potentially not even be legal for us to make. I think that that's really important.
Commissioner Minema.
I think we can still have discussion, and then for me, if I say no to the current motion, it allows me to have conversation on all of them, yet still allowing more motions to be made as we get to each policy, and perhaps I would be in agreement on some of those. I probably actually am more in agreement. I want legal to be looking at least 3 of them if they proceed. But I do think discussion today, if we take the motion and we vote to support it, that ends action items 4 through 7 today, and then we're done. I would just like to have discussion on some of it and give feedback to corporate counsel as it's already stated here.
Commissioner Moss.
I guess I have a question for corporate counsel. Are you against discussion today?
No, I am not against discussion.
Wonderful.
And if I can just add one more thing, as far as the policy, there are 2 minor changes being made here, which on its face, I don't disagree with. I don't think that there's any legal ramifications on those changes. The one change is that it's, instead of looking at the policies every 2 years, it's every 4 years. And that's because of the way commissioners will be voted in. Instead of a 2-year term, it's a 4-year term. Very reasonable, very sound. The other change was, help me.
Minor.
Oh, yes. From 3 votes to 2 votes. That's, again, entirely up to you. It's not a legal question. It's more of a policy or a legislative question on how you like to conduct yourselves. So onto that point, we would have no disagreement. So, but the motion that Commissioner Zylstra has put forth would be more applicable to policies 5 through 7. But I am not against discussion. I think, in fact, that would be very helpful for us in terms of how we move. But I would be, I'm going to repeat, I still think at the end of the day, it would be best served to table those remaining motions, those remaining policies until we've had a deep dive in them.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask, Commissioner Cosby's hand was up, but I just see that it went down. Gretchen, do you have anything?
So
Okay,
what I'm hearing
Go ahead.
from Mr. Jordan is that he would prefer to table at this time. question for you, Mr. Jordan. Would you tell me, we have a 3-step process here, 3 readings, correct?
Yes.
And so today would just be discussion at this point of items 5 through 7, with the exception of 4 here. We will have 2 more readings, meaning opportunities then for changes or comments, edits. Is that accurate?
Yes, that is accurate.
Well, she's asking if we're voting today. We would be voting today.
If you vote, you're voting on the policy that is currently before you.
But we
And-
don't know if it's legal or not.
And yes, Commissioner Kern is correct. There may be things in there that are not legal, or there's concerns. So to vote on them would be premature, I think. That's why I'm suggesting tabling them. Not to say that you can't have a discussion, you should have a full discussion, robust discussion.
Could we
and-
move them to discussion items instead of action items?
Yeah, I was going to say,
I like that idea.
let's let this vote take place first.
I'll call
'Cause
the
we still-
question.
Or do you want to amend that?
No.
Okay.
Let's call the question. And if there's a majority, call the question, we'll vote on this. And if it doesn't succeed, then you're welcome to make that motion.
Because I think I'm trending to the thought process of some of these, modifying that, the stated motion on the
Okay.
agenda. So let's go to the roll call vote first and
I have a question.
see where we shake out.
So I want to understand that if you vote yes, then these will all be taken off
Yeah.
and we'll
sent
have
to
no
legal.
discussion.
Correct.
Correct.
So, but can we make another motion
I
to
will do that.
switch them after that to make them discussion items?
Yep, I will make that motion.
And we will not discuss them at all, but it's just going to be a different motion. So we vote yes for that. Then we can make him, and if we vote no to his motion, then we can still do another motion for discussion. Is
Correct.
that correct?
Correct.
And you're okay with that, legal counsel?
So I'm fine with that.
Okay, let's go to vote.
Mrs. Curran,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra.
Yes.
Mr. Moss,
No.
Mrs. Rhodey,
No.
Mrs. Medema,
No.
Mrs. Ebel,
Yes.
Mr. Bergman,
Yes.
Mr. Bonema,
Yes.
Mr. Belknap.
No.
Motion passes.
Okay. All right, so that means we move to,
Mr. Chairman, I have
Yes.
an appointment at 11 o'clock, so I know you need to leave in just a few minutes.
okay, thank you. All right, so so what we just did is to move items 4, 5, 6, and 7 to be tabled for
Council review.
council review. Okay. And I think just for the sake of the committee, knowing that the council, legal counsel will be reviewing these, we can look to these at the next planning and policy meeting coming back.
Mr. Chair, I just want to thank you for the discussion. I appreciate that.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And I just wanted to comment too, again, chicken or egg a lot of times. And so
I think we'll get there. So
that's why this process is going to take time.
Yeah.
And so I do appreciate the feedback, and I apologize if there's, frustration with this process, but I'll take responsibility for that. Okay, so moving on now, we're going to be discussing the broadband expansion and tower development with our Director of Strategic Impact, Paul Sachs. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to talk about broadband. I have a few slides that I'll efficiently move through. I think these will help tee up discussion on the contracts, which I understand the board will more formally be considering at a later meeting. Jordan, will get that teed up. Thank you. Next slide. Jordan's going to be my diligent partner in this. I have some animations on this. If you want to
Animations.
again on this, Jordan. So I'll start by saying in the early 2000s, state of Michigan really did a disservice, in my opinion, on helping communities build the infrastructure needed for the 21st century and how to succeed. It was under the Granholm administration that they sponsored a project called Link Michigan. They had a contractor that went to every county and they did an assessment of internet connectivity. Link Michigan was designed to make sure that Michigan was connected for the future. The report that we got back for Ottawa County, next slide, please. Yep, next, click again. It said in quotes that the opportunity for residents to connect to high-speed internet is perceived, or the inability, it's not real. Basically, the report said, if you want to connect to the internet, you can do it. The infrastructure's there. Again, in my opinion, that really got us off on the wrong foot to really pay attention to how this infrastructure needs to expand across this state. Next slide. As a county, we've always worked diligently to be at the forefront of how we ensure our vibrancy into the future, especially looking at infrastructure. And when mobile 3G wireless came on the scene and before the 2010s, we experienced significant challenges with gaps in wireless coverage. I'm sure you've all experienced that as well. Also became a public safety issue with deputies out on the road not having connectivity and efficiency of service, having to go back to the office and download their data. Examples like that, let alone just residents having access. So this is an example with Sprint's wireless coverage where we established a partnership with Sprint. They came forward to us. Next slide, please. And you can click again. And they said, well, let's look at what these opportunities are to enhance wireless coverage. And philosophically, as a county, it was not our space as government to get involved in where the private sector was already going to build towers. That was what they did as a private industry. But their business models are challenging in rural areas. They don't meet the ROI. So we sat down and had conversations, said, well, we know we have gaps in coverage. There's a connectivity issue. This is a safety issue. If the county partners and build some towers and local governments and leverage our public assets for these carriers, would you co-locate on those towers and deliver your service? So we did a scope of county and municipal public properties and said, okay, well, what can we leverage to allow some towers to be built that made sense to those companies? One of the first sites that we collaborated with was Grand Haven Township and had Sprint go on a water tank. You can click again. Some other dead zones here. This was a site at Fillmore, not just a couple hundred yards away. This was a major dead zone, real challenge for some operations, especially when people would come into this office and go, where are we here? We don't even have cell coverage. So we built a tower and we only built it when the providers said, yes, if you build a tower here, we'll co-locate on that site. So Sprint and Verizon came, you can click, Jordan, please. Okay. We did another site at Johnson Street, and these were in collaboration with Parks Department, of course. When sites are identified, we do the due diligence, of course, have the conversations. Does it make sense? Build these towers, what do those agreements looks like? So that was Johnson Street, Verizon, AT&T, and we steadily expanded coverage. It was really a good learning experience for a public-private partnership to really benefit the residents. Click again, please. Simultaneous with this work to continue, and you can keep clicking through, Jordan. These are just real quotes from residents. continuously and ongoing, providing comments to the county on what their challenges are with internet and their frustrations and their gratitude that we as a county were forward thinking and looking at how do we address these issues. I even got an email last night from a resident as well, saw this on the agenda. These conversations are happening continuously. Next slide, please. Then, under the next state administration, they partnered with Connected Nation and an organization that was spun off called Connect Michigan, and they started to do an assessment of, and this was published, I think, 2014, of broadband access. And click, please, Jordan. And you see Ottawa County. We look outstanding to the state in terms of wireless coverage. And these maps are being promulgated everywhere from the state and federal agencies and the FCC. And our residents are saying, this is not right. We have to figure out what's going on. Click ahead, please. Really comes down to the FCC. Click again. This is known if you Google FCC broadband mapping challenge. This has been an ongoing issue for years. FCC finally recognized the way that they interpret data from private sector carriers is not actually representative of what is happening from an infrastructure standpoint on the ground. The FCC also recognized that their minimum broadband speeds are far too low the way technologies have advanced. They're sitting at 25 megabytes download and 3 meg upload speeds. To succeed with data streaming and everything you need to do, best minimum standard that's been set now, especially at the Robin grant that we'll be talking about here, is 100 megabytes per second download speed and 20 up. It's obviously a much better, but that gives you that space for the connectivity that we need as a thriving county. Advance, please. Advance, please. So explaining FCC's issues, it's from a, and you can click a couple times, Jordan. It's based on census block information. That's good right there. Oop, thank you. Census blocks are these boundaries that are created oftentimes by geographical, jurisdictional boundaries or road networks. So obviously when you get into a more urbanized area, your census blocks are tighter. As you get to more rural areas, your census blocks are larger. The way that the federal government had ISPs report on connectivity for your residents was if one household had a connection to the internet, the entire census block, regardless of the number of homes in it, would be identified as being served. That is what has perpetuated the challenges with understanding real infrastructure needs, especially in our county. Click ahead, please. Click again. So then in 2017, Michigan's, okay, well, we're going to do another effort to look at connectivity, and we're going to try and refine mapping. They were realizing that was an issue and advocating legislatively for FCC changes. So click ahead, please. Another report came out. We had our, that's good there. I will say, in my opinion, our arm was twisted to participate in this study. We didn't have to pay for it, but they said, you need to do this because we're going to do another assessment of infrastructure for you. I said, well, fundamentally, the data is going to be flawed. The benefit I saw of doing this is at least we pulled together a 25-member committee, cross-sectional industry representation, so we could all get on the same page of what was happening and start to build momentum for where we needed to go to fix this issue. So they did this report for Ottawa County, Connected Michigan, and at the end of it, they said, hey, Paul, county, let's hold a press conference because we have certified you, Ottawa County, as a connected county. So we're absolutely not going to do a press conference to say that. That would be just disingenuous and it wouldn't be accurate. So click ahead, please. So this report, yep, 2 more times. Thank you. Gave us 2 maps one at the 25 speed, one at the 100 speed, and we've got over 98% coverage. All households can connect to these speeds if they want to. We know that's not right. We continuously get feedback from residents, and we're slowly mapping this over time. Click one more time. Then in the report, we made sure that they added the disclaimer. It wasn't in past reports for other counties. We had them put it in ours. Where my eyes, I know are bad. I'm going to the eye doctor next Thursday. I know it. My wife made me do it. But basically, they say, yeah, the data's overstated. We get what we can from ISPs, but hey, you know, this is the best we got. Click ahead, please. Click a few more times. Again, we're continuously getting reports from residents. We set up something on our website. So if you got issues, let us know. We need to start spatially understanding this and refining our infrastructure challenges. Click again, please. Then another grant program stepped forward from the state of Michigan, CMIT grant. All these grants that have been coming through for the last several decades from state and federal agencies, they only give the grant funding to internet service providers. Local communities and counties, you can't apply directly. And there was no requirement for partnerships. And so these businesses would apply for a grant and they would go to where they want to go to get a return on investment. Yes, we've been investing tax dollars in infrastructure, but it hasn't solved the problem because we haven't, as government, been actively engaged with partners in the private sector. So when this grant came forward, actually had a company called West Michigan Broadband step forward and said, okay, we're trying something new. They had a new way to deliver internet service in rural areas, daisy chaining along consumers' energy right-of-way easements. They said, okay, well, let's try this because you have to hit the ROI in the right way for rural areas in particular. So we got almost all township supervisors around the table and we started brainstorming. How do we partner with this company? Click again, please. Thank you, Jordan. And we ended up working specifically with Talmadge Township because they said, yep, we'll put up some funding for this. Department of Strategic Impact. Let's do click a couple more times, Jordan, if you don't mind. Yes. Oop, back. Thank you. And we'll dive in and we'll do our own boots in the ground survey and take one community to figure out our methodology, right? To figure out who has access, who doesn't. And then let's apply for this grant with West Michigan Broadband taking the lead. One of the most vocal streets in the county that I'm aware of, has been Loose Street in Talmadge. I'm very challenged with accessing the internet. And they've got Comcast on one end of the road, Charter on the one end of the road. No one's going to make the connection forward. If they do, the quotes are like, okay, it'll be a couple $100,000 right on you as an individual homeowner. Obviously, that's not viable. So we started to drill this down, and West Michigan Broadband said the way that the grant criteria worked, okay, let's specifically look at Loose. Let's try to do something for the residents. Click ahead, please. Click again. And you can click again. That's Loose Street. And one of our channel, looks like my map got skewed a little bit. Basically, that road line goes right where the box is. What our challenge was with this particular grant is that gray area, don't mind clicking again, that was already monopolized by another large-scale carrier that got a grant 5-6 years prior. And it was based on that census block. They connected a household and it blocked the entire Loose Street area from being eligible for funding. And with that other grant, and it was Connect America funds that this large carrier received, there's no accountability for them to actually build out where they said they would. This is where my frustration has come in over the last couple of decades on dealing in this space. Next, please. So unfortunately, we got abandoned from that grant opportunity, and West Michigan Broadband moved elsewhere. And so I continued because the residents being so vocal on loose, approached charter, click again, please, said, okay, what can we do? You know, and they're like, well, yeah, let's bring it to corporate. No, I'm sorry. No, I got back to you. There's nothing we can do. So click again, please. We're left at the mercy of internet service providers, basically. The real big challenge. So how do we leverage and utilize our experience in public-private partnerships, leveraging public assets to make this work and really drill the data down? Click ahead, please. And challenges had continued. I think that window kind of blocks it again, but this is a map. This might have been a 2018, 2019 map that was on the state of Michigan website again. The coverage shows the county is served and well served again. Click ahead, please. Yes, there we are, right? Served and well served. We know that's not right. Move forward. Then we dove in deep and we partnered with Merit Network to dial in countywide on really refining as best possible where internet is and isn't. The FCC map that you see right now shows what the county access was at speeds of 25.3. When we did this robust scientific survey and assessment of broadband needs, click again, Jordan, please. We start to get a better picture of what's actually happening, breaking down census blocks in a more refined manner. Proceed again, Jordan, and do this again. These are speeds at 120. So again, the FCC, those maps are being promulgated, and those are the maps that have often gone into the grants saying, hey, any of these areas that are served, sorry, you're not eligible for any grant funding. We had to correct what that narrative was. Move forward, please. Study takeaways. You know, we've got almost 12,000 residents without access. You know, another 30,000 don't have the 100 meg speeds. So we've got about 78% of our households, you know, are challenged with getting that good 100 meg, reliable 100 meg speed. Click, please. This map is refining our understanding on a building footprint data on where service is and isn't. This is 100 meg download speeds. The red indicates unavailable, underserved and unserved. Blue is served. This is the data that we're continuously refining over time, and through the FCC challenge efforts and through the state of Michigan mapping efforts, these items or these households are what the Robin grant says, these red dots, those are eligible sites to get funding. So we've started to have some influence in this process and really refining this on where this is going. Click ahead, please. And that is where we did the proposal, request for proposals, and 123net came forward to help and seek out grant funding and deliver and build that middle mile fiber backbone that is needed for the residents in our known areas of need. Click again, please. The Robin grant, as you remember, we passed the letter, you all passed that letter of intent to partner with them to apply for Robin grant. There was a round one of Robin, which we did not get, and that stung a lot. Fortunately, there was a round two that was recently announced, and Ottawa County is the top of that list to get round two funding for addressing and building the middle mile open access network across the county. We're currently in the review period. That review period ends December 21st of this year. That review comment period, it essentially allows internet providers to check every list of address that we plan on 123net plans on connecting and passing by with fiber infrastructure. If those internet service providers say, hey, we actually do provide service on this spot, click ahead, please. Looking at these red dots, we do provide service there, and we provide at 120 speed. That address is then removed from being eligible for the grant funding. So it's a refinement period. Yes, so then on top of this, this is the high level design that 123net has proposed for the county. This was from 9 months ago, right? This is high level estimate only. It'll be refined as we move forward, but it starts to represent and give you the visual on the connectivity paths that we're starting to think about with this funding. About 400 miles of new fiber optic cable across the county. It's also designed as an open access network, meaning it's a middle mile backhaul. Any internet service provider will be able to connect onto that fiber and deliver service. It creates competition. It's something that hasn't been done before in a structure like this, where you have other companies that have received grant awards. They'll monopolize an area. They only get their ROI for their spot. They stop at jurisdictional boundaries. And Oakton Township is experiencing this right now. They got an internet provider that wants to run a cable through their community to get to where they've got a grant for, but the grant doesn't allow them to give access to residents of Polkton. This project does that with the open access design. Click again, please, Jordan. Want to point up in the northeast area of the county of particular attention, right? This is our more rural area. There is definite demand for enhanced broadband connectivity up here. And again, these engineering designs will be refined if we move forward, right, in partnership with 123Net. But extending fiber infrastructure everywhere is very costly, especially when you're getting into rural areas. That is where, as we look at our whole broadband strategy on partnering not only with 123Net, Robin grant funding to do this work, there's a fixed wireless tower component as well to hit those more rural areas, to help the business case. And those towers need to be fed by the fiber optic cable. So there's cooperation between what's going on with 123Net and then a tower contractor that we're also looking at. Click again, please, Jordan. Tilson Infrastructure is the company that has come forward through an RFP process that we released through the county. And they are looking at the opportunities there's continued gaps in fixed wireless coverage across the county. They've done some high-level designs right now, and they're looking at potential tower sites that will utilize the fiber backhaul and connect it. So if you look up in the northeast, right, we're particular attention to those areas in Chester and right. Click again, Jordan, please. Some of our challenges, I wanted to put this layer on here because it points out the red and blue, those are other providers that have received grant funds through other sources, and they kind of monopolize those areas. It's an unfortunate situation that we've got to navigate from a financial perspective with 123Net. And you can see this is why Polkton in particular is very challenged, because those providers didn't see an ROI to go into Polkton, so they just aren't serving them. 123Net in our partnership proposal, right? We definitely start to address that with open access network. Click again, please, Jordan. Then in cooperation with 123Net and Tilson, got to get the fiber backhaul to power those towers. And that is where we start to get some additional loops in those harder to reach areas that we'll navigate as we move forward with more refined engineering plans. What's also very advantageous with that fiber extension that hits the towers, because it's an open access network, right? And you're passing by homes, those rural residents in that area will start to gain the ability to access internet. And it, again, creates competition, more providers coming into play. The Tilson contract, there's no county investment. They're coming forward with all of their own capital. The contract itself is designed as that will be presented to you, is designed as a master agreement. It is all of that legalese language, right? There's a lot in it, but it's specifically designed for this project for efficiency and approval. It's a master agreement that with that master agreement, if approved, Tilson then has the ability to directly engage with carriers, assess sites. They almost have this exclusive partnership with the county to determine how we address the fixed wireless component. That gives them leverage when they're meeting with carriers like Verizon, T-Mobile, and AT&T. Once they identify real sites and we look at leveraging potential county properties, again, the master contract is no commitment to the county, funds, no commitment for tower sites, but allows Tilson to start to go to explore. Once they do identify some sites that make sense, they build their business model with carriers. There's the site license agreements, which are in your packet as well. That's only 2 pages. It's like a page and a half. And that's designed for efficiency and approval, if you will, right? Master agreement. And then these sites will come in a one-by-one, case-by-case basis. Those individual site license agreements, they will speak uniquely to, maybe it's Grosse Park, maybe it's some other woodland space for the county, who knows? But as we internally review it, say, okay, what are the maintenance requirements? What are the access requirements? What are, some of the lease payment terms? That's all done on a case-by-case basis. And it will be for each individual tower. We're not yet at that individual tower site spot, right? It's the contract allows Tilson to move forward to give us options. There may be county properties that just don't make sense, but they're also going to be engaging with local units of government for leveraging public assets and also private sector as needed to get the towers where they have to go. Click ahead, please. Targeted timeline. 21-day comment period, as I mentioned, ends for the Robin grant December 21st. Within several days after that, 123net will be obligated or not to accept that grant award. So between now and then, the intent is to bring forward the contracts with 123net and Tilson for consideration of board approval. 123net accepts. We refine engineering for a while, do that due diligence. I know there's some other local units of government that have set aside significant funding to also work in their community to leverage the new middle mile assets for their residents. That would be a collaborative process, and those details on what this looks like are all defined in the 123net contract that you have. Then all goes according to plan, shovels in the ground by next year. When you look at time frame to get this done, looking at 400 miles of fiber and a lot of navigation, right? 1 year to get that done is very aggressive. So 2025, don't expect that. We'll make a big chunk, I expect, to move this forward. It'd be 2026. And that's what's identified in the contract with 123net. Before the end of 2026, this work will be completed. And Tilson contract is aligned with that as well. Again, in terms of efficiency and approvals and reviews to get the infrastructure to our residents where they need it and how they need it. And we hope after all of this work, we can really activate what's coming together, I believe, in a very strong way. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Any questions? Mr. Bottom?
Paul, that was a lot of great information. Thank you for the graphs and the maps. That's very visual. Appreciate that for everyone's sake.
Yep,
and the public. I've been tracking Starlink. They've been aggressively opening up the northern states of the United States, including Michigan, including my address in Zealand, fast download, unlimited data. How do you see them being a player in this space? Because they can today provide that service to those rural communities where you don't have to wait for this shovel to hit the ground a year from now and then some.
Absolutely. More options for residents, the absolute better, in my opinion. And Starlink certainly is a viable option for many people. It could, for others, be cost prohibitive. The equipment is fairly expensive.
It's $500.
About $599,
$600.
$600.
Yeah.
Yep. And then ongoing costs are relative to other providers. It has its limitations with download and upload speeds. It doesn't reach the 100 meg speeds for true data streaming that's needed. But again, it's an option. I also know that it is still satellite as well. So you get interference and cloud cover and weather can be an issue. There's also some homeowners, when I've brought up conversations of Starlink, not to dismiss it, right? I think it needs to be promoted as an option for people. But others have said, I'm not going to clear all the trees on my property so I can get the satellite signal. It's not for everyone, but we have to give people the options to move forward. I love the idea of promoting it and doing something with Starlink here now that they've opened it up. For sure, I'd love to work through details of even a pilot program has been tossed around. So.
I certainly believe in the value of this project and want to support increasing accessibility to solid internet connections to all of our homeowners. I believe we have about 10,000 addresses right now that have less than great internet connectivity. I think it's also been shown over and over again that by doing this, we improve property values, which is really great for those folks that own those properties when they go to sell them, that they have a wider market that they can sell their home to, or their business can operate. If somebody decides to buy their business, they can operate in these rural communities just as if they were in a highly populated area that has fast internet. So
Yes.
that certainly benefits those rural communities, school districts, road commissions, the infrastructure that makes our country work. So this is a needed thing in this modern day, just as power and water and air, it seems, internet is something that we all use on a daily basis to go about our business. So yeah, thank you for continuing to bring this in front of the board.
Thank you for your comments.
Any other questions for Paul?
Okay. Thanks for being here, Paul, and for all your work with broadband. I think I've shared this before when we applied for probably the first round of Robin funding, that it was something that really became knowledgeable to me as I went door knocking. A lot of my residents brought up their inability to connect or had spotty signal, or it was affecting their day-to-day operations with farming, with schooling at home, especially during the time when we went through shutdown. That was a real headache. There's a lot of people that currently still work from home. I know personally when I moved in to Talmadge that I had to use a little hotspot, and I only have the luxury of having what I currently have due to someone who moved in that was able to afford paying for internet for our road. And so that became more affordable, but that doesn't happen all the time. So I'm very aware of the problem. I am appreciative of the work that Paul's done, and I'm looking forward to, I appreciate the presentation you gave and to show the headaches that you've gone through over quite a period of time, and continued with the residents that continue to suffer, that I think they're ready for some actual work to be done, right? Boots on the ground, that instead of just talking, like they're ready to actually see work happening. So some of the dialogue I wanted to share.
Thank you.
Commissioner Moss?
Part of my understanding is that there's state funding as part of this project. And is it accurate to say that that funding has to be expended by mid-26 or it potentially is lost?
That is what I understand, but I have to double check the Robin grant criteria. I know the ARPA funding had deadlines on it for use of those dollars, but we're in a different position there.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So it was my understanding that then that will help with the timeline, because it does seem to be that there is kind of a deadline. And so this project, if started, won't then expand over multiple years. So there sounds like 123Net and some of the people involved are very eager to get started and hoping to do a lot of work very quickly.
Yes, that is correct. And the contract with 123Net that has been drafted specifies that date of no later than the end of 2026 to complete this work.
And total cost, even though 1, 2, 3 would be bringing funding, and there's, ARPA dollars that the county has, the state then is 16 million.
It was about 16.
Yeah,
15,
okay.
16. Yep.
Okay. Two other questions. Is there a reporting function to the county? Reviewing the data as the process goes on, impacts long-term, that kind of thing?
Yes, I know some of the immediate reporting criteria that's built into the contract itself, as the distribution of funds from the county will be incremental based on their advancements of the infrastructure passing by percentages of homes. So that will all be reported and totaled before it wouldn't be one lump sum. So this is part of that partnership opportunity, ensuring accountability to the providers for what we need done and where.
Is there any part of the reporting where it's going to look at connectivity to homes instead of just the pass by? Or have you talked about that with them?
I love that question, and that's a great one. I think we can address when the contracts come forward with 1, 2, 3 net in the room.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
One other one would be just on the final map. I know it's still draft form. Any idea on timeline or how the maps will be finalized? Is there kind of a process is it between multiple stakeholders? Does 1, 2, 3, if this moves forward, do they retain full decision rights on the maps? How does that work?
I think final engineering, they would have to have their stamp of approval, but the collaborative input process, it needs to be robust. It needs to involve local units of government, ISD, public safety, anchor institutions, and 1, 2, 3 knows that to really refine it. And that's another good question to bring up for them in the room.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Thank you.
That was the same question.
The same question. Okay. Anyone else? Paul, I just appreciate the conversation that we continue this. Obviously, very important to my district as well as Allison's. Big swaths of that map are, in our areas. And the comment about Starlink, we learned last week that our central dispatch is actually going to be having a antenna installed on the facility as a sort of backup in case we lose our communications for, E911. Obviously, that's critical infrastructure. And so I was just kind of curious how that plays out, and, Starlink becoming a player that we're starting to see. I commented in that meeting, I recall being at a bonfire and watching the Starlink satellites, hair in the back of my neck stood up because I didn't know that was coming and thought we were under attack.
Yeah, that's great. I had one of the same experiences recently too. And with Starlink, back to the previous comment made about maybe a pilot, and engaging with central dispatch. I'd love to start collecting data and input, user experience, and really test the efficacy of it. And that's something that we can showcase to residents on how that can be another option for folks.
Yeah, I know Director McWaters would be happy to have that conversation. So any other questions for Paul? All right, thank you.
Good, thank you very much.
Okay, that brings us to our second round of public comment for planning and policy. All right. I'm just waiting. I'm seeing if, yep, okay.
Ian Zimmer, Port Sheldon Township Chairperson. An analogy on pending policy action requests 4, 5, 6, 7. If 12-220 Fillmore Street were a toxic waste landfill, all landfills in Michigan are regulated by the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality and must adhere to rules that are in place to protect the surrounding community and the environment. Please submit application to apply for site permit and licensing before conducting operations. If 12220 Fillmore Street were a toxic waste landfill. Type 1 landfills are facilities used specifically for the disposal of materials designated as hazardous waste. These landfills contain additional protections suitable for hazardous material disposal in them. Type 1 landfills require means of barrier containment to stop toxic leachate migration from spreading into the surrounding environment. January 3, 2023, Ottawa Impact acted as a midnight hauler when John Gibbs was transported to 12220 Fillmore Street. Gibbs was radioactive political waste byproduct when he lost the 2020 general election to Democratic nominee Hillary Scholten in a historical Republican territory. Since being hauled to Ottawa County Fillmore Complex, the toxin has been leaching into community health, hiring choices, best practices, and if allowed, the leachate plume will poison the community at large. It will be tragic and a lack of good judgment to allow 12220 Fillmore Street to join the Superfund sites of polluted locations in the United States requiring a long-term response to clean up hazardous material contamination. Ottawa County residents deserve better than unregulated landfill dumping by clandestine midnight haulers.
Anyone else for public comment?
Lori Grassman, Robinson Township. As PJ said earlier, it appears that we're no longer actually doing board work. We're just assassinating people's characters. But I would like to say that we're in Ottawa County and Mr. Gibbs happens to be sitting in Ottawa County, that he actually won Ottawa County 53%. So thank you, Mr. Gibbs. Thank you, board, for everything you're doing.
Would anyone else like to address the board? Okay. Before I call adjournment, we will be meeting again here just in a matter of minutes for the Finance and Administration Committee meeting. Just kind of looking at the other members of the committees here. We would like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 10 minutes. Okay, 10 minutes. So 11:10. We will resume. There'll be another 2 opportunities for public comment for those visiting with us, and appreciate your participation today. Thank you.